A lot of people treat short stories like they're writing novels, but I will argue until the day that I die that they are their own genre and should be treated as such. If you are approaching short stories the same way that you would approach a novel, it's time to mix things up. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a short story writer who holds a bachelor's degree in creative writing, and I teach the foundations of creative fiction writing to writers either just starting out, looking to get published, or anywhere in between. I'm bringing my teaching practice online to you and people just like you who are ready to take their writing careers to the next level so that you don't have to sit through 4 years of school and go into student debt just to be able to write a decent story. When writing characters, you've probably been told to know anything and everything that you can about your character before you start a story. What do they look like? Where did they grow up? What's their relationship like with their parents? Sure, these things are important to know. These kinds of questions can greatly affect the way that your characters move through their world, but it's also important to know how these characters are going to show up on the page. Today, I've got 5 points for you that will affect the way that you write characters in your next short story. We'll talk about how many characters you should have in a short story, what point of view to portray your story in, learning what your characters want and what roadblocks they need to overcome, and lastly, we'll figure out how all of this plays into the larger character arc. When writing short stories, we want to keep the number of characters to a minimum. We want a focused story that uses every word on the page intentionally, which can include descriptions of characters and interactions between characters. We want to see what really matters because we only have so many pages to get to know your characters and see them through to the end and see their transitions, see them grow. With limited space, it can be really hard to develop a cast of characters to the degree that a quality story needs. If there are too many characters introduced so close together on the page, which would be inevitable in a short story with a large cast, readers will start to confuse characters for one another or not remember important details about specific characters. Rather than having a complex plot that involves 6 or 7 half-baked characters, it's really important for a short story to hone in on about 2 or 3 characters so that we can really dive into them and get to know them. We want these characters to be really well thought out and given the room on the page that they deserve. When you have too many characters on the page, there just isn't enough room for us to really fully invest in any of them. They all become sketches of a character rather than a fully rendered character like we want. As I said, we want to use every single word on the page intentionally, so every time you introduce a new character, you're taking words from another character that could be developed more fully and seen as more of a real person. That being said, that doesn't mean that you can't include small characters like a shop clerk who has a few lines. It's okay to include those minor characters that help your story feel real. We just want to hone in on about 2 or 3 main characters. This will really give your story more of a purpose and a focus. Another decision that you'll need to make before you start writing is whether your story will be in first or third person. And of course, as you revise and edit, you can go back and play with this, but we need somewhere to start. If you need the refresher, first person is when your story is told from the point of view of a character. You'll use words like I, me, mine, we, and us in the narrative. This can be a great way to really connect your reader to your characters. Your reader is going to see everything through the eyes of the narrator anyway, so using a character as the narrator helps you put the reader in at a really personal level from the get-go. You can easily dig into the thoughts of your main character this way, and you can really get this level of first-hand introspection that might be harder to get from other points of view. In the third person, you're telling the story from an outsider's perspective. You're using words like she, he, they, and them. There are 2 different ways that you can do third person. You can do a limited third person, which means that you're really closely following a character, but you're still telling the story from a third person perspective. Or you can do more of an omniscient third person, which means that you're looking over the cast of characters and your narrator can dive into anybody at any point and read their thoughts, see what's going on in different rooms. They have this omniscient feeling like a god. They can see whatever is going on. So you know how when a friend asks you for advice or a solution to a problem, and to you, it seems so easy, done, you know exactly what the answer is, but your friend can't really see that because they're so close to the situation. It's the same thing here with first person versus third person omniscient narration. Your friend would be that first person narrator. They're really close to the action, so they might have some limitations in what they can do as a narrator, but your third person omniscient narrator can really see the full picture because they're not so close to the action that it's blinding them. So you get to decide where your narrator is in that spectrum of being a first person all the way to that third person omniscient. You need to decide how close they should be to the action based on what's going going on, what will make sense for your reader to enjoy. I think that writing a short story in first person is a great option with that limited word count compared to a novel. This way you don't have to spend time transitioning between different points of view or going into different locations in your story. You're really just focused on a person and that character and what their story is. And you can also achieve this with that third-person limited narration rather than that third-person omniscient narration. With that third-person omniscient narration, you might spend time digging into different characters throughout your story, and you might spend time looking at different sections of the story. But with a short story, it's much harder to do that with the limited space on the page. This third-person omniscient can be a great tool in a longer piece like a novel where you have that room to explore those different areas. But again, because we want our short story to be so honed in on something specific, it's harder to achieve that with the third-person omniscient. The first-person narration is so honed in already just by the nature of that first-person narration, so it's a great choice for a short story. So whether your story is really character-driven or plot-driven, your character is going to want something throughout the story. When you're starting to think of an idea for a story or starting a first draft, you got to think about what each character wants, what each main character is after. This might be a bigger idea, something that they're yearning for, or it could be a smaller goal, something that they could achieve in a couple of days. This could be a specific feeling that they're after, or it could be some life goal that they have. But whatever it is, it needs to be able to drive your story from the beginning to the end. So let's break down some genres and think about what these characters want in these stories. Romance novels are often driven by their main character looking for a partner, looking for love, looking for a relationship. Crime novels are often driven by someone wanting to solve a crime, or maybe a murderer wanting to commit a heinous act. Revenge stories are driven by the character's need to settle a score. They think that that'll make them feel better about the previous situation. These are pretty surface level wants. A lot of these will have deeper meanings underneath them that relate more to the character specifically, but you can kind of see an overview of what I'm talking about here. Because as people, we always have an objective, whether we notice it or not. We always want something. Sometimes that something is a feeling. We want happiness, we want calm, we want more excitement in life. Sometimes there's a more specific want in us. We want to reconnect with our family, we want a fulfilling career, we want to get in shape. These desires really shape us and can define who we are as people during different parts of our life. When we want to reconnect with family, we might learn to be nicer people or more forgiving people. If we want to get in shape, we might learn to be more disciplined people. So I want you to think about where your character is at the beginning of their story and where they need to end up to achieve that goal, to meet the needs that they're wanting here. And we're going to use that as a roadmap for our character's journey. How do they get from point A to point B during your story? And your character's also going to need to want something in each individual scene of your story, and these smaller wants are going to flow into that overarching goal that drives the whole story. So say that your character's overarching goal is to reconnect with their family. Maybe in one scene, their goal is to get that stubborn brother to agree to come to dinner. And these smaller wants will help move your story forward. They act as small plot points throughout the story, and they help move us from point A to point B. They get your character just a little bit closer to achieving their goals and getting that want met. And this can also help you build up the suspense of whether or not they achieve that larger goal. It gives your readers something to be invested in throughout the story. Now you have an idea of what your character wants, but we need to make sure that your story does not get too predictable along the way. Now that you know what your character wants, it's your job to make them work for it. A story where everybody gets exactly what they want and nobody has to work for it is not a good story, not an interesting story, and frankly, it's unrealistic. Every day we face setbacks in our goals. Sometimes we go through bigger forms of rejection like breakups or job loss, but we also hit much smaller roadblocks. Maybe your car doesn't start one winter morning, or maybe somebody cancels plans on you and so the rest of your day is out of whack. It's all part of the human experience. We all face these setbacks during our days, and so your character has to face them too to feel like a real character, a real person to us. So let's look at that example of your main character wanting to bring their family back together. So they want to go to dinner with everybody, but their brother is having a hard time committing to these plans. That right there is an obstacle that prevents your character from reaching that overarching goal. If their brother is not invested in it, then maybe the rest of the family isn't either. And this one moment of dinner not being able to be planned is not a huge life-changing setback, but it's annoying and it gets in the way for your character. It also shows the agency that that brother has. It helps build him up as a real person. If all of your characters bent to the will of your main character, well, again, that's not very realistic, not very interesting. And this conversation is not only a good roadblock for your character to figure out, but we also get to see the relationship dynamics between that brother and sister, brother and brother, whoever they are there. How do these siblings talk to each other? Is one more tenacious than the other? Does one give in more easily than the other? Or are they both so stubborn that they're just going to butt heads and never give up until one of them finally wins? And it's now up to you as the author to decide whether or not that main character convinces their brother to come to dinner. And then you have to think, how does this help move your story from point A to point B? How do we see this play out in that larger goal that your character wants? There are lots of little things that you can throw in the way of your character to give them those roadblocks so they have to overcome something and they have to earn something to reach their main goal. And you could even plot an entire story this way. Just continually pick up roadblocks and then fill in the pieces as you write. With these wants and roadblocks, your character might learn a few things along the way. Your main characters will start to show their arc. If you need a refresher, a character arc describes the changes your character goes through during a story, typically emotionally. This is how they get from point A to point B. The shy boy becomes the hero, the school bully learns empathy. We've talked a lot about change in the last 2 sections because people love to read stories about change. We love to see a character grow and become somebody a little bit better than they were when they started. Emotional growth is seen as one of the best traits that somebody can have in their life. On the flip side, when you fail to grow or even regress in that growth, that can make for a pretty interesting story too. But I think we'll get into that another time. All of these things that we've talked about aid in that creation of your character arc. We've established the wants and the roadblocks and how your character is going to grow throughout the story. So that means that the point of view that you tell your story from and how that character interacts with other characters on the page is going to be how your reader can make sense of that growth. Those aspects portray that character arc to the reader in a way that makes sense to them. We see them start at point A, when we watch them go all the way to point B. We see each and every step along the way, we see them grow, and we see them overcome those obstacles. Or not, dealer's choice. But typically we see them getting closer and closer to reaching that goal until finally we arrive at the end of the story and there's an outcome one way or the other. So that's how I would look at characters moving into a short story. The overarching character arc is built through much smaller actions along the way, and those will happen whether or not you have a character-driven story or a plot-heavy story. If you're developing those round, realistic, and relatable characters, the 3 R's of characterization as I like to call it, then you're gonna need to think about these 5 issues that we talked about because that will help you create those characters in the best possible way for your short story. And I have a free download in the description of this video that will help you continue this work. And if you're interested in more ways to build characters, I do have a free training on effectively using a character profile. It'll help you take everything that you learn in the character profile and actually use it in the pages of your story in a way that makes sense and uplifts your whole story to another level. And if you liked this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe so that I can reach more people in the same position that you're in and we can all become better writers together. And lastly, you can check out my website in the description below for more resources, including blog posts and other free downloads that you can get that will help you get writing and help you improve your writing. But I'll see you next time, and until then, happy writing.